What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about summer worm fishing. The best baits, some tips and tricks to help you catch more fish right now. Summertime worm fishing. Where do we even start? When you walk into your favorite tackle shop, there are usually pegs and pegs and pegs, sometimes aisles or rows of different soft plastic, worms. So should you be throwing a ribbon tail worm or a curly tail worm? Should you be throwing a straight tail worm, a long and skinny mag shaky head, or a power shot, or a Carolina rig versus a Texas rig? And that's what we're going to cover today. The different types of worms, some of my favorites in each category, and then the different techniques. When should you be throwing a shaky head versus a Carolina rig? Or when should you be throwing a power shot versus a shaky head, right? So we're going to cover those things today, and hopefully by the end of this, you guys have a lot more confidence in those said techniques, and you have a better idea of what style of worm you should be fishing. So first off, basically I'm going to break these worms down into two categories: straight tail worms, which is just that, straight tail, and ribbon tail, curly tail worms, okay? See the difference? Which one should you be throwing on your Texas rig? Which one should you be throwing on your Carolina rig versus your shaky head versus your power shot? So we're going to cover that. And then next, what rig should you be throwing? Which technique should you be throwing? Should you be throwing a power shot, an upsized drop shot with a bait caster, heavier line, heavier hook, but you're suspending that bait up off the bottom? Or should you do the exact opposite and have your bait down there on bottom, rigged on a shaky head? Are you dragging? Are you hopping? Are you shaking? Again, which rig or which technique fits best for you? And we're going to talk about that as well. We got some awesome straight tail worms. We got some awesome curly tail worms. But I wanted to talk about the different types of worms real quick, and then the different types of techniques, because that really matters. One day they might be eating the drop shot or the power shot, and one day they might be eating the shaky head, and vice versa. Texas rig over Carolina rig. Those of you guys that don't know what well, I showed you what the power shot was, right? Basically, that's why you tie your weight on. Basically, you have your weight down on the bottom, and then you have a suspended bait, typically a straight shank hook. Again, we're talking about summertime worm fishing, so you can go finesse if you want. You can go spinning rod and such, but today we're talking about summertime power worm fishing. So I know there's like creature baits, and then there's nosed hook baits, all that sort of stuff, but today we're kind of focusing on more of the power fishing, worm fishing techniques, okay? So the power shot, basically, like I said, that straight shank hook. Usually it's a cover shot HD with like a 2-aught or something, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. A shaky head. Okay, that's that dirty jig shaky head right there. But basically, head's down there on bottom, tail of the worm is up there just kind of dancing and floating around. This thing is awesome for fishing in and around brush or grass edges. We're gonna talk about locations too. And then maybe it's a mag shaky. Maybe you're out there ledge fishing and you want to throw a giant worm, right? We're throwing something on a mag shaky head, big old 10 or 12-inch worm. Or Texas rig, right? You run your favorite tungsten or lead bullet weight out in front of your worm, and you're down there. We're not flipping or pitching, right? We're actually throwing this thing out. We're not talking about flipping and pinching or punching today, but you rig it the same way. But putting that bullet weight out in front of your favorite curly tail worm. And then last but not least, the Carolina rig, where you run your main line, you tie a leader to a swivel, then you run anywhere from an 18-inch to a 4-foot leader to your hook, and then you tie your worm on. So worm on. So you have that bait down there on bottom, but you have a kind of a weightless worm doing its thing down here, and that really has its time to shine this time of the year. So we're going to talk about the different techniques, and then the best worms to fish on those techniques. So let's talk about the Texas rig. I feel like that is the most common out of all these techniques. It's something that I've fished ever since I was a little kid. Doesn't matter if you're a pond fisherman, shore fisherman, or out on the nicest bass boat they make. A Texas rig has a place somewhere, or should have a place somewhere in your arsenal, because it is weedless. You can fish it in and around grass. You can fish it in and around brush. You can fish it along grass edges. But the Texas rig is really a staple, should be a staple in your arsenal, especially if you're fishing around cover, around stuff, or through stuff. Now, the Shakey Head, it's one of the most effective ways to put a lot of fish in the boat. Way back when, several years ago, Matt and I did a video where we basically caught 100 fish on a Shakey Head. We wanted to see how long it took to catch 100 fish, and we did it successfully in just a few hours. We were back on Clear Lake, but we were just basically throwing this exact setup right here. And a Shakey Head, you know, you will catch big ones doing it, but it's an effective technique, especially this time of the year, as those fish go out. They get down in that cooler water. They're down kind of relating to the bottom, out there off of the ledges, or out there off those main lake points, those rock piles. But the Shakey Head, it just gets bit when, you know, some of these other larger worms don't. Okay, and then last but not least, the Power Shot. It's a great alternative to the traditional drop shot. Again, you're upsizing your line, you're upsizing your hook, you're keeping the same size weight, but now you're able to put that worm in and around cover and suspend it. So it just has a different presentation than the Shakey Head. You could literally use the same worm, but get a completely different presentation, because now you're suspending versus down there rooting around on bottom. So I have all of these kind of rigged up, or at least 2 of these rigged up all summer long, because it doesn't matter if I'm out offshore dragging through shell beds or rock piles or high spots, hard bottom, or I'm out throwing around active fish and I'm hopping it up and shaking it, getting real aggressive with it. So it totally depends on what the fish are doing, but depending on the different styles of worms and the different technique, we got a match for you. All right, before we talk about the baits and the rigs themselves more in depth, let's talk about where should you be fishing. It doesn't matter if you're in a float tube, or if you're fishing from shore, or if you're out on the main lake. Fish can be in all different areas of the body of water, right? If you're on a pond, they're going to be in that thick grass, they're going to be in that cover. If they're, and vice versa, they could be out by the dam on the deepest part, down maybe in 15, 20, however deep your pond is, down there by the deepest part of that dam. Down, if it has riprap, you know, those fish can be down there as well. And then anywhere in between, right? So I'm always looking for, you know, main lake points, ledges, high spots, shell beds, rock piles. I'm looking for hard, kind of hard bottom. Usually that's where I start. You know, there are situations where you might find a creek channel, and you might find a grass line or something where those fish are in the grass, but they're ambushing out along that grass line. But for the most part, this time of the year, especially when I'm worm fishing, I like to find harder bottom, those shell beds and that rock. It doesn't matter if I'm dragging a big Shakey Head or a big Carolina rig or a small either of those. I just want to be able to feel that weight down there in the zone, we'll call it. I just feel like I get a lot more bites when I'm around heavy or hard cover this time of the year. Now, we talked about main lake points, we talked about shell beds, we talked about humps. If you're fishing shallow, it's all about dock pilings, brush piles, grass patches. I've had so many good days throwing this power shot around just in sparse grass patches. Doesn't matter if it's red leaf or hydrilla or what, but if I'm just fishing those grass edges and I can flip and pitch, even though we talked about, we're not talking about that earlier, but I can cast along those edges and just suspending that bait in that grass. I mean, I've had some of the best days doing that, and that's saved me too from some of the worst days. I've been out on the ledges throwing flutter spoons and cranking and stuff and blanking. And I go in shallow on grass and I start flipping or casting that power shot around, and it's like fish after fish. Those fish like to move into that lively, healthy grass. But totally depends on your fishery, but that's the type of stuff that I'm looking for, and that's where those fish are going to be at. All right, let's talk about some retrieve tips, because I feel like a lot of people they go, maybe they're beginner fishermen or maybe they're an advanced fisherman, but they don't fish a worm too often. It wasn't until I started watching underwater footage that I realized myself that I was giving my baits, a lot of my baits, too much action. I think that really plays into why some people get more bites throwing the same exact thing. It's all about how you move that worm. And sometimes I find myself shaking and hopping it too much. But if there is a season for more action than not, it's right now. So right now you can get away with making those little mistakes and hopping it too much or shaking it too much. But as you get out of summer and you start talking about some of the cooler seasons of the year, you really got to be thinking about that and pay attention to that, because you don't want to be giving your bait too much action. But right now, I mean, a shaky head, throwing it out there, might as well do it since I have these guys tied on. Again, I throw it out there. I might be fishing a brush pile. I'm fishing something. I'm not just throwing out blind casting to mud, right? I'm either fishing a rock pile or a laydown, a brush pile. But the best thing about this shaky head, two good things, right? I have the weight at the head, so that this line tie is right at that, is right on that head, and that head is down there in the rock. So I can feel every little rock that I'm hitting if I'm hitting right. Okay? But I might be dragging, pop it up just a little bit, drop it, let it sit, shake and drag. I'm doing more of a kind of lift and drag technique than opposed to just the shaking. If I need to, I can pop it up and then let it fall, especially if I'm fishing around grass. If I'm fishing around grass, you can feel when you kind of get hung up in the grass. So you let it fall, kind of dragging. Again, I'm not just letting this thing sit there. I am moving it. I'm just not hopping it crazy all over the place, okay? Kind of lift up, let it fall. It's on bottom. If I feel like I'm in grass, I might pop it out and let it fall. 9 times out of 10, when I pop it out of that grass or a brush pile, it's when I get bit, okay? But a shaky head is so good because it's so easy to throw, it's weedless, and it just gets bit. Again, several days where Matt and I went out and just caught loads and loads and loads of fish. Again, every once in a while you get a big one mixed in, but we got some other bigger worms we'll talk about to try and target those larger worms. But again, we're firing out there, let it hit bottom, and then again, we're kind of, if we're coming through a rock pile, we might lift it up and drop it, bring it up and over that rock. We get hung up, you could pop it out, let it fall. So we're not doing a lot of shaking, but we are moving it fairly quickly. If you do get to a isolated area or an isolated rock pile, definitely slow down and really count those boulders and pick those rocks apart. But the power shot, same type of thing. Actually lost my weight, but we'll figure it out. Fired out there. Now, having this bait suspending up off bottom, it's down on bottom. Now I'm just kind of lifting, a lot like the shaky head, checking that initial fall, then it's kind of shake, lift up, let it fall. A lot of times, because this thing crashes down to the bottom, I will get bit on that initial fall. Throw it out there, let it fall, I'll lift up. And one thing I do want to point out, it's really important, especially this time of the year, a lot of times, even on that initial fall, that bait will be picked up. That fish will eat it on that fall and just start swimming with it. I'll never actually feel a tick or the bite, because as it fell, it caught it when it was falling down, and now it's just swimming away. So I kind of just lift up and there's weight, check it. If it's whoop whoop or you feel that heavier, reel down and jack them. But these fish are active, and a lot of times they'll catch it on the way down and you'll never actually feel that that thump or that tick, okay? And then Carolina rigs and Texas rigs, that is, I'm gonna pretend I got one tied on. I fish those, a Texas rig, because that head is basically attached to the worm, a lot like the shaky head. The difference with the Texas rig is you can put a bobber stop on your line and adjust how far that weight can slide up and down before it hits that bobber stop. But again, I'm just kind of dragging, feeling everything down there. I'm not really hopping like I might a little bit with the shaky head, but I'm dragging, and then dunk. And then with these bigger worms, I do want to say this, I'm sure I'll forget somewhere in this video, with these bigger worms, right? When you feel that dunk, I've had 12-inch bass eat a 12-inch or 14-inch worm. They didn't stew. So they eat it or they hit it, and then you give them a little bit, you feel that dunk, give them a little bit of slack, check it for that weight, and then reel down and hit them hard. But if I'm throwing a Texas rig or a Carolina rig, 99% of the time, that is when I'm throwing the ribbon tail or the curly tail worm. Again, you get that same dragging motion, but now you're getting that twisting action, that swimming action, even if it's just super subtle, of that ribbon tail. Where this worm's not gonna do, if I'm dragging this worm, it's not gonna do anything. Whereas this guy, if I'm actually swimming it, now that tail's down there swimming, or if I'm just dragging it, it's just down there rocking side to side. If there's current, same type of thing. So 9 times out of 10, most of the time, I'm throwing some kind of ribbon tail or curly tail worm if I'm fishing a Texas rig or a Carolina rig in deeper water. Those are usually my go-tos for the deeper water. And again, I'm throwing that bigger worm to try and eliminate some of the smaller fish. But you can throw the bigger worms on a shaky head like we talked about earlier. It totally depends on the gear you're throwing and the quality of fish you're trying to catch. Okay, so now that we talked about the different techniques and kind of what we're looking for and where we're fishing, let's talk about the 2 categories of worms and why I like them. I mean, I got like, I got 6 straight tails and 5 curly tails or ribbon tail worms. Okay, we talked about how to rig, basically how to rig these different techniques, and we have videos on each of those specific rigs. But let's talk about the straight tail worms. So we're talking about the shaky head, and we're talking about the power shot. This guy right here. This is the Deception Worm by X-Zone. Okay, the reason I'm starting with this one, this is probably the most finessey out of all the worms I'm gonna recommend. Okay, you guys have heard Matt rave about this worm right here. This is the Deception Worm. It's a really slender profile, really small diameter. If you're a highland reservoir fisherman or a lowland reservoir fisherman, and you're fishing around like spotted bass, that sort of thing, I really like this slender profile even in summer. It's a more finessey worm. Okay, that works really, really well on the missile head. We'll link everything down below in the video description. Or the Dirty Jigs shaky head works really well on the power shot. Okay, this is a lot thinner worm. It's going to have a lot more action, a lot more movement. The X-Zone worms in particular are neutrally buoyant. Okay, so they just sit level in the water, which is awesome for the power shot, and it's awesome for the shaky head because it will kind of bring that belly up and that tail will kind of just kick and meander. But that Deception worm is a really, really good option if you're still kind of throwing this stuff on lighter line and lighter hooks. Okay, that's why I wanted to bring that one out. But I have a better recommendation from X-Zone if you're looking to throw a little bit larger profile. This is the 6-inch MB fat finesse worm. It's literally what I have rigged on this shaky head. Okay, look at the difference. Oh, I already put that one away. But you can see this has a lot thicker profile. It's still around the same length, but in the water, it just has a lot bigger profile. And again, neutrally buoyant, a lot of action. This is an awesome, awesome shaky head worm. Again, paired up with that Dirty Jigs shaky head. That is my go-to right there. Okay, same good, about to mention colors. We'll talk about colors in just a second, but good colors to choose from. Might as well just talk about it right now. I just mentioned it. Junebug, plum, green pumpkin, black blue flake, a lot of those natural colors if you're fishing clear water. And then even in clear water, June bug is my #1 go-to color. So some kind of June bug, whether it's, you know, this guy right here is called green pumpkin, June bug, basically the best of both worlds, right? A green pumpkin, black flake on the back, June bug on the belly. But most of these worms I have here are gonna be in one of those colors I just mentioned, okay? My next go-to worm, and you guys have heard me rave about this guy for a long time, especially on the Power Shot. This is the Missile Baits Magic Worm. Again, these are poured by Robo Worm, so you get some great colors, but you get more detail than your traditional Robo Worm with these Magic Worms. You got ridged back, you kind of got a bulbous tail, you know, some core shots in there, some belly shots, but that Magic Worm is my go-to worm on the Power Shot. Ooh. On the Power Shot, I really need to fix this. The weight came off, but on the Power Shot, that is my #1 Power Shot worm, that Magic Worm. Again, I'm liking, if I'm around bluegill or I'm around fish feeding on bluegill, I'm going with some more of the natural colors. But if I'm out offshore fishing rock piles and humps and high spots and shell beds, that sort of stuff, I'm going with some kind of June bug-esque color. But that guy right there is my go-to worm for that. A couple other worms for you real quick. This guy right here, the Janitor by Crush City. Crush City came out a couple years ago, and they've just been continuing to add awesome baits to their lineup. You know, I love the Freeloader. I love a lot of the Mayor. I love a lot of their soft plastics, but this guy right here is called the Janitor. Again, it's another 6-inch-ish worm, has some ridges to it, some detail to it, but again, this has a ton of action as well, so a lot of tail action in the water. So again, these are worms that you're gonna wanna throw with warmer water temps and when those fish are active. But that guy right there is an awesome little worm to throw. I say little, it's not that little. But now we're stepping up into the larger worms. This is an 8-inch. This is the Big Bite Baits Finesse Worm. Okay, that's an 8-inch trick worm styled worm. These baits are fairly inexpensive and they are straight up fish catchers. And they are available in the tilapia color, which is another awesome color. It's actually what I grabbed. It's kind of like a natural June bug-ish color. It's got a lot of flake in it, has that kind of green pumpkin black flake in there with some purple and blue. So it has a lot of the tendencies of that June bug color, but that tilapia for me has caught fish all throughout the country. And that Big Bite Baits is really the only, not the only, but there's very few companies that make a tilapia color, and that guy works really well. You can see the length different between that and that X-Zone. But last but not least, I'm gonna talk about this guy right here. This is the 10-inch Okie worm. So if you're a guy, I'll just pull one out. If you're a guy that wants to throw bigger worms that actually don't weigh a lot, you get a lot larger profile, right? A lot larger profile, but it doesn't weigh a ton. You don't need like a special rod to throw this thing. You will need a special head, a little bit larger hook, shaky head, but that thing is awesome. You can see it necks down right here towards the tail, has a bulbous tail, a lot of action. The benefit of this guy right here is it's made by Yamamoto. Just great colors, okay? I actually have one rigged right here on a Magnum shaky head. So that is the straight tail worm. Again, most of those worms I just showed you, I'm throwing on a shaky head. A couple of them are my go-to drop shot worms, power shot worms, I should say. But now let's switch gears and talk about our Texas rig and our Carolina rig worms. I can't do this video without talking about the, this is the Mag Old Monster, the Zoom Old Monsters. This is the Zoom Mag Old Monster. The actual, I grabbed one. The actual Old Monster is quite a bit smaller than the Mag. 10-inch versus 12-inch. But you can see the profile, the diameter of the body itself, a lot bigger profile in the water. But these things have a lot of great action and have caught a lot of big fish for Matt and I, whether we were night fishing or in California or down on Falcon, Texas rig fishing or Carolina rig fishing. But these guys right here are a staple, and these are the first worms that I ever threw, magnum-sized worms that I ever threw. But there are some good additions to that lineup. Let's talk about another staple. You guys ever heard of this guy right here? The power worm. So I started throwing these things again when I was a kid. They smell, I'm gonna say they smell amazing, but they don't really smell amazing. They have a great smell. They have a fishy smell to them, but most people have smelled that smell and or caught fish on a power worm. The power worm, they're available in like a 7-inch, a 10-inch, I think a 12-inch. But again, that ribbon tail or curly tail is an awesome bait to throw on your Carolina rig and your Texas rig. Again, the main difference with the Carolina rig and the Texas rig, you're both kind of dragging. The Texas rig, you're connected to the weight, to the head, and you're down there on bottom. Whereas the Carolina rig, that weight's down there on bottom, but you have that leader, and that worm's up there just doing a real natural fall, real natural flutter or kick, okay? This has been an awesome worm for me. This is a little blitz worm. I say little, it's an 11-inch worm, but it's relatively little in comparison to the old monster, right? It's a really thin body, but again, you get a lot of ribbon tail, a lot of action, okay? So if you want to throw a smaller profile, but a longer worm, that guy is really fun and easy to throw. You can throw this on a spinning rod. This, you can throw it on probably a medium or medium heavy spinning rod, but this you could throw on your favorite medium power a spinning rod, but you still have that really long profile. And again, you get that X-zone action and that X-zone float. And then last but not least, last one by Yamamoto. This is the 10-inch Ichi worm. So you got the Oki and the Ichi. How this worm is different, it's almost like a stick bait, right? It's got some ridges to it, but you can see it's got a real stout body and then a short little stubby tail. So it's kind of the best of both worlds if you like that Senko fall. But again, this is an awesome Carolina rig bait because it does have that fall like this. It's not crashing to the bottom on that Texas rig, and it has that flutter of the tail. But that is a really cool worm. Again, a lot of these ribbon tails, they have just real long tails, whereas this has quite a bit shorter. It's thicker, but it's quite a bit shorter, but it has that more stout body, and that thing is kind of the best of both worlds if you want that thing on that slow, steady Carolina rig fall. But guys, as far as colors I talked about, keep it natural if you're in fairly clear water. Otherwise, go with something like tilapia or June bug. This color right here is called plum candy. Your purples with your flake in it, black blues. If you're in dirty water, go with some contrasty colors, or you're fishing at night. Summertime worm fishing at night is so much fun. I touched on it a little bit, summertime night fishing in a recent video, but summertime worm fishing, throwing big worms, dragging them over those main lake points or those high spots, those rock piles, those basically community holes, throwing that bigger worm. It's a different presentation these fish haven't seen a lot of, and it's just so much fun when you feel that dunk. You don't know if you're reeling down to check. If it's heavy, you don't know if you're gonna be setting into a 10-inch or a 10-pounder. It gets that heart pumping, that blood flowing. It is so much fun. But guys, hopefully this summertime, you're fishing one of those 4 styles, one of those 4 techniques, and one of these 2 styles of worms. Again, I like to have a ton of action in the tail with my dragging baits, and I like to have nice tail kick or flow on my power shot and my shaky head. But hopefully that helps you guys. Hopefully that makes sense and helps you figure out which way to go pairing your worm with your technique. But as always, guys, down below in the comment section, you can leave your questions. We'll try to get those as soon as possible. But guys, we appreciate you watching. If you learned something from this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.